What's up, everybody? This is Will. Just a couple of quick notes before we hop into this episode of the podcast. I want to remind everybody that you can certainly leave a review of the podcast if you're enjoying it on your favorite podcast player app, or you can leave one directly on our website, podcast.lovablesurvivor.com. All the ratings and reviews really do help the show grow, and we'd really appreciate it. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the community that we're building, you can go sign up for updates and details at vip.survivorscience.com. And without further ado, let's hop into this week's episode. Good morning, everybody. My name's Will Schmier. Welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor podcast. In today's episode, we'll be discussing how embracing change involves letting go of the old you and welcoming the new you. Now that sounds corny, but hear me out. We're going to talk about understanding the stages of recovery and what happens in between those stages. I call them plateaus. You might call them something else. I'm sure other people call them something else. But we'll talk about the importance of maintaining a positive outlook, and we'll delve into the role of humor and honesty during the journey, and really letting go of maybe the old you, previous ways you thought of certain things, previous ways you thought of yourself, thought of others. And again, really embracing sort of the new you. And again, that sounds a little corny, but mindset is a big ongoing topic when you are a survivor of stroke, brain injury, honestly, cancer, any major medical life event. You're going to be faced with different challenges, and some you can control and some you cannot. And that's why I think, for me, mindset is such an important topic, because it is something you're in control of. It's something you can get ahead of. Not always, but it helps, especially when things kind of go off the rails, or your mood or lifestyle or just the day to day feels like things are getting a little busy. I think we all face this, whether you're a stroke survivor, brain injury survivor, even regular everyday people have difficulties maintaining a positive mindset. Over the last couple of years, mental health and the way we think about that has changed for the better. I think there's still a lot of work to do there, but also, if you are somebody who considers themselves to be pretty self-aware, you can get into little weird situations where maybe you didn't overthink things, and then now you find yourself overthinking things. It could be life related, it could be work related, it could be business related, it could be because your circumstances have changed. Maybe you don't have friends and family in the same sort of headspace or phase of life that you're in. So, this is going to be a little different for each and every person. But I think, and this is not, I guess, embracing the new you, I want to make an important distinction here. Embracing the new you is, I think it is accepting what you have gone through, what is a little different in life. It doesn't, and this is a little different than sometimes you hear things like the new normal, and that's really, I hate that so much. It's fine if you like it. It's just, for me, it's not really my jam. I guess the best way I can do this is I could start off with some examples. So when I say embracing the new you, I'm talking about obviously change after, that major medical life event or any real life event. There's going to be changes. You're hopefully on a path of discovery, self-discovery, awareness, growth. These are all sort of natural things that, you may find are things that are feelings you're having. These are normal feelings to have. They might not be feelings that other people are having because sometimes it just takes one of those life events to really change. It's interesting. I read again in that book, Hope After Stroke. There was something she talked about in chapter, I forget what chapter, but she called it post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is different than PTSD. This is like, sorry, yeah, she calls it post-traumatic growth syndrome, which is interesting to me. I actually haven't heard that used before, but I think it's something that resonated with me. Now, it may not resonate with everybody, and it may happen at different times, but typically, probably if you're listening to this podcast, you feel like you've had a little bit of an epiphany, or maybe you've had this thought, or yeah, maybe you have had this thought, maybe you haven't heard this either. And it can happen, as a result of a big thing. With an event, there it can go one of two ways. It can go the, I think we can all I think it's something to be aware of, but we all have down days. We can all spiral out of control at times. Hopefully that's very short lived, or you're speaking to somebody on a regular basis to work on that. But I think once you come to sort of that acceptance level that I spoke about a couple episodes back, and this is kind of like an ongoing thing. I was thinking about it. There's definitely stages of stroke recovery, right? There's the first year, and that you could break that up into two pieces. I mean, it's different for everybody, but there's sort of a progression. You're constantly hopefully getting a little bit better each day. Sometimes there are those plateaus, and I think it's important to discuss that because it can be unfamiliar for survivors. I don't know that caretakers, family members, I think it's important to kind of get them involved so that they can be aware of these plateaus. And it's natural, right? Because you're doing work at every stage, whether it's, 3 months or 6 months in, you probably have done a bunch of work at that point. And so you're going to plateau probably. I mean, not everybody does, but I think that would be natural, especially if you're putting in extra work, you're going to be tired. It takes some figuring out your body. It takes figuring out lifestyle changes. It takes figuring out dietary changes, all positive changes, by the way. It's not that a plateau means things are going poorly. It just means, maybe your body's telling you, it's your body's way of telling you need to maybe take a break. Maybe, I think with every stage of growth, there is a plateau where you need to reassess and consider talking to somebody, and that looks different for everybody. Sometimes just talking to another survivor friend, and they don't have to, I think there's a lot of overlap. When I say survivor, obviously I am speaking specifically on stroke and brain injury survivors, but I mean, I also have MS, which is not a brain injury per se, but it's autoimmune. But I think there's definitely a lot of similarities in those two. In cancer, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people that have to deal with cancer at some point in their life. Hopefully it's the kind that is easily treatable, but that's a traumatic thing you're going through, and not everybody survives it. And it's depending on the type of cancer and the research and they're not every cancer is the same, just like every stroke is not the same. Yeah, so it's important to understand the process of recovery. It involves a lot of change. There's a lot of, there is a lot of stress on everybody involved, but there's also a lot of growth that comes along with that. And, it is not an easy thing to navigate. That is actually one of the main points of this podcast, is to help people that are kind of going through that change and recognizing it and realizing, no, you're not alone on an island. You're not weird. I honestly used to think, I think the first year or two, I was like, man, I feel like I'm on an island, but I wasn't, because of COVID. Honestly, there just wasn't thing. I wasn't getting that sort of connect, I wasn't able to connect with people on a level that, where they really understood. Of course, I was going to physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy in year one, lots of therapy, but outside of therapy, I wasn't even in therapy, I wasn't really talking to other survivors and seeing what they were going through a little bit, but not really until like year two for me. So yes, I did have a lot of underlying conditions that I had to sort of get addressed and focus on in year one, plus COVID, plus, really just getting back to basic life. And then, yeah, I mean, I think that is normal for lots of survivors. Some are lucky or fortunate, either or. I say lucky just because that, but fortunate to not maybe have as many deficits or as many physical deficits. And so you may have some emotional changes. So this is just as difficult. Again, there's not a big distinction in terms of the level of difficulty when it comes to physical or mental. I think they're both equally important and equally difficult to understand and assess. And it takes some time to get through that. And so, again, when I'm thinking about embracing the old, letting go of the old you, I'll give you another good example. What I mean with that is like work, right? When I used to do pretty much anything, I could do it 100 miles an hour, full steam. Nobody could stop me. I could have 3-4 monitors. I had a mouse on my mouse on a screen share with other developers. People would be like, "Will, slow down. Like, I can't keep up." And that's tough. And that honestly, I was talking about it just yesterday, and I was realizing, I was like, oh man, I really like. So the first year after my stroke, it really took me some time to, there's all these changes. You're kind of embracing that new you. It's been a struggle to, maybe because I'm younger. So technology plays a part, but think about things like typing. For me, I was typing 70, 80 words a minute, and now I'm doing 25, 30. I still work on it. And I've talked about this on a few episodes now, but it's something that I work on pretty regularly. And I just constantly have to reassess. It is not linear in the fact that I could do a bunch of like if I put in 1,000 hours, I may not see the same results as somebody else who put in 1,000 hours. And I've said this a bunch in the past, and I probably said it on this podcast, but for me, my stroke really was like, and again, not everybody's going to feel this way, but I felt like in a lot of areas, I was very fortunate, but in some areas, I was not as fortunate. Handwriting and typing, at 37, when I had my stroke, basically put me back to almost the level of like a kindergartner. And I'm not joking. Yeah. And I've obviously worked on it and things have gotten better. And I'll be honest, yes, I'm very lucky. I did not have major aphasia. I did not have really a lot of cognitive things. Obviously right side affected. I think I've said that a bunch. Some hand issues. right side. Walking, the MS got the left side. So that's why walking was particularly hard for a little while. But, that has come back. And again, these are things that I embrace and I kind of, I struggle at times with remembering the way I used to be and wanting desperately to be that way. And the reality is, I may never be that way. So it is a mindset shift. And I just think it's really important. But on the other hand, every time I think of that, I think about how I've gone, how in the last 6 months I went from now, I think we're almost at 7 or 8 now. But since October of last year, I really changed my mindset after 39 years and 10 months of living on Earth. Hated running with a passion. And last year I figured out a way. I got into the Peloton, got into nasal breathing. These are things that I found along the way that I got into, and they sort of helped me get to running. Now, I also think no longer smoking and drinking obviously play a big role in getting on to running. But, I think my brain is kind of rewiring itself. And so while there are parts that I miss and desperately want to get back, and I'm still working on, I'm also simultaneously embracing those new ones. So, I just encourage people to stick with things. And, I think the last point I'll make specifically around embracing the new you is like how I got to running is interesting, right? Because breathing was a big part. The other big part, and this is hard, and I don't know if this is a result of turning 40 last year. So I don't know if this is age related or stroke related, but I'm going to touch on it because I think it's important. I got into running and I just stopped caring about going fast. Now, I love to go fast because I love to just kind of speed up the time after 6, 7, 8 months of working on it. But I just thought I was in a wheelchair 3 years ago for most of 2020. I don't care how slow I run. I just like the fact that I'm running. And I have to remind myself that I'm no longer 20. I've had a stroke at a young age, at 37. I don't really care about speed, and I think that has been a big change and a big mindset shift because I don't think even the will that was almost a quarter ton at the time of my stroke, like, I think I cared too much about what other people thought, and I would feel embarrassed because I couldn't run faster. Now I feel lucky to be able to run. So it is extreme, but I think the stroke actually helped in a lot of ways in terms of really getting into running because, like, again, the option for me was like, well, I was in a wheelchair. So the fact that I can even run at all is amazing to me. Yes, I'd like it to be a little bit better. I wouldn't mind going faster, but I'm okay with where I'm at. So that was, I just thought that was a big point to bring up because I think when I think about letting go of the old you, that running example is a good one. And I think the screen thing is a good one too, because, I really, why does anybody need 3 screens? Like it's nice because I can open things and push them to the side. So it is helpful, but I think just kind of reevaluating, and I say that all the time on this podcast, but I think just starting to be able to let go of the way things used to be and sort of accepting the way things are now. And just being, if you want them to change, they can change, but you got to start somewhere. And so I think that's really important. With the understanding of embracing the new you, let's move on to the journey of recovery itself and the stages and really the plateaus. And I think, these are going to be different for everybody, but I'm a little bit into year 3 now. And I think, there's stages. There's year one, there's probably the first 6 months that everybody talks about. And I think you could even break that up into smaller chunks. There's the initial, right after you had the stroke, chances are you're going to do some initial therapy, whether that's inpatient or outpatient, for the first month or so post stroke, depending on, the level of assessment and severity of the stroke and what insurance in the States at least allows for. And again, I did touch on this earlier, but then, you get into that 6 month, and that 6 month is a big one. And there's, I think at 6 months, you're looking at sort of the first level of stability. I would call that sort of out of the weeds, so to speak. And then you're stable. And then I think the next stage is like you're stable and you're doing pretty good and you're feeling motivated. And then there's like, all right, I'm starting to feel normal ish, and I think you eventually go from stable to good enough. And then there is sort of a final, and really there's a couple of stages. I mean, they're not super clear, but I think there's about 5 or 6 stages. And where I'm at, I think is I feel like I've been at good enough for a while, and I just really want to get to the next level. And that's what I talk about a lot, especially on Twitter. And it's going from good enough to unstoppable. And I don't know if there's a stage after that, but I think I'm definitely in the stage of going from, I've passed the initial phases. I've been good enough for a while. I've been pretty good, and I'm really just looking to keep leveling up a little bit each year. So I don't know that I'll ever be unstoppable. And I don't know if there are things that I necessarily like. Sometimes I think about dunking a basketball still, and I'm like, do I really need to be 40 years old and dunk a basketball? It would be nice to be able to say, but I don't know that that's absolutely necessary. But the running is a big one for me. I can't believe that happened in the last, this part of this year and the end of last year. So I know I always encourage people that just because they only say X, Y, and Z can happen in one, the earlier years, I do think it is. And you hear it a lot from other survivors. They talk about there are plateaus, both physical and mental, and it's something to be aware of, but it's not something that can't be overcome if you want to overcome it. And it is, again, it does go back to mindset and sort of the overall mentality. Of course, you might run into issues. You want to be safe when it comes to physical things. You want to talk to your team. And I think that's why I talk to my team every year, because I know I can get better. I know there are things that are not really 100%. And, again, you have to assess your own situation. But it's like, for me, I feel like there's still room to grow in those areas. And I feel like with a little bit of work and a little bit of help, I can get there. And I could probably do it on my own. But we pay for insurance, might as well take advantage of it. But yeah, I think that is, really an important thing. And that's one of the things I like to help, I want to help with this community, is help people go through the various stages, navigate those, but also get through those plateaus, because they can be again, they're necessary. And they're going to happen. I think there's no real avoiding it per se. Sometimes they're just easier to get through, and sometimes they can be difficult. And that's going to be very individual. And it's, I think it's important to ask yourself, when you feel like you're hitting a plateau, is it because I can't do anymore? Is it because I need to take a break? I think it really gets back to that curiosity about, being, you don't have to be anything, but I think being self-aware and, realizing, am I tired? Have I peaked? Should I talk to somebody, maybe to get an outside opinion. All very important questions to ask yourself, and I think, if I'm being honest, I think that really kind of goes into my sort of third topic of today. And this isn't going to make a ton of sense, but I don't think, I was thinking about this a lot for me and the community that I'm building, Survivor Science, and sort of just everything I do online and as a creator. And never underestimate the value of humor and honesty. And I know those don't necessarily often seem like they go together, but they're sort of the very base of me and the brands that I build, the things that I want to do. And what I want to talk about here is that I guess when it comes in regards to the plateau and the plateaus that may happen at the various stages of recovery, I'll hop into honesty here, but honesty, when I talk about honesty, I'm talking about honesty with yourself. And again, I believe I talked about this on a previous episode, but it can take time to be honest with other people when it comes to your recovery. For lots of reasons, you may not want to get ahead of yourself. You may be unsure. I often struggle with that. Like, have I hit a wall? Am I sure? I'm feeling like I'm on this island by myself sometimes. Like, I'm standing here and I'm looking around and I'm like, and I say things and it's like, am I the only one who's thinking this? Sometimes that is the case, but yeah, I think I just encourage you to, when you're on these plateaus, really be honest with yourself. Ask yourself the hard questions, because asking yourself hard questions and sort of working on those things allows you to really assess where you want to go and where you maybe need to put more time and effort, or just make note that you'd like to work on this thing, whatever it may be, whatever part of the recovery. So, and I'm just big on being true to yourself and not sugarcoating it. And I know not everybody is great at this. A lot of people are not great at confronting other people, and I'm not really suggesting you do, but I think you do need to confront yourself when it comes to your recovery, because the only person in charge of your recovery is you at the end of the day. And if you're not honest with yourself, it's going to be really hard for others to yes, teams are versed in extracting information, but only to a certain point. And if you really want to utilize the tools at your disposal and really take advantage of this second chance that you may have been given as a survivor, it is important to be honest with yourself, and that way you can make the progress that you really want to be able to make at the end of the day. But I will say there are times where it's not so easy and it's not so clear. So, as long as you're, I think just, you don't have to do anything, honestly, but I think it's important to be honest with yourself, because again, that is how you're eventually going to get to where you hope to be one day. And when I say be honest with yourself, just be honest, and if it's not something you can achieve this week or this month or even this quarter or even half a year, maybe a long-term goal, just, be honest with yourself, because yeah, it's how you're going to get to, like I said, to that place you want to be, and just, I guess, be compassionate towards yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you're not where you want to be yet. I think yet is an important point, because there are times where I want things to be better and faster already. And still, year three, it is difficult. And there are people who have been stroke survivors for 10, 15 years who they're still working on it, So I think that's why sharing stories are so important, because I don't think many stroke survivors maybe were super ambitious pre-stroke and super fast and able to do millions of things, and it just changes. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around. It takes a while. And so I think when I talk about embracing all these things and navigating the stages and the plateaus, compassion is a really integral part of this, and I think even when it comes to finding meaning in what you do, it also takes courage in these difficult times, and like, all this mindset stuff. It's not easy. It's valuable. It's absolutely valuable, and it's just know that it's not easy. And like a lot of people in life, we're all just kind of figuring it out. But I think it's important to embrace change and be introspective and be compassionate towards yourself, as well as seeking support from professionals, whether it's a psychologist, maybe just talking to your therapy teams, physical occupational speech teams about recovery, resetting expectations. I know this is as old as time. Honestly, I was thinking about this yesterday. I feel like I learned it in college. I learned how to plan for projects at the end of every semester. But in life, I sometimes get away from it. Everything takes longer than you plan for in life. And that only gets harder after being a survivor, after having children. Try to remember it sounds so easy. I think you hear people say it all the time, but really, even people that are not brain injury survivors or stroke survivors or cancer survivors, or haven't gone through that medical life event, even the most agile, nimble, sharpest people, things take time. And so that is important to remember. And the last thing I'll touch on today is humor, because I know I say it every week. I feel like these episodes get really a little bit heavy. So I'm going to try my best to really make sure that I'm incorporating humor in these episodes, because honestly, I mean, listen, nobody wants to be a stroke survivor. Let's just put that out there, right? Like, I didn't choose to be a stroke survivor. Honestly, one of the things that held me back for the first couple of years, I don't think was my underlying issues with. I mean, yes, I played a role. Yes, it does take time to figure out, like maybe like here are some of the difficult things for me. And you might find this to be the same. I think when you have a stroke and a major medical life event and you were not on track to, like, I was never a hypochondriac, and I'm nothing against people who are, but I think I struggled with even doing this podcast for a couple of years, because I didn't want people to feel bad for me. I barely feel bad for myself. I recognize that I made some life choices that were not the best, and that's something I have to live with. And honestly, I think if I had been in a place where somebody, maybe things could have been different had I spoken to the right doctors or gotten the right medication. And I guess what made me think of this is a friend of mine he's 37. bigger guy, you know, a bit better shape than I was in at the time, but similar story to me. Thankfully, not a stroke survivor. Sounds like he's got some things under control. And I guess, looking back, it's like after my stroke, I got, the CPAP and I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. And I do think I had my stroke in my sleep in the hospital, which is probably why it went undiagnosed. Oh, by the way, quick thing in the middle of this rant is that this is May of 2023. And I do want to remind everybody that it is Stroke Awareness Month. I am a stroke survivor who talks about stroke all the time. You're listening to this podcast. You probably know this is primarily about stroke and brain injury, but I didn't want to forget to mention that it is Stroke Awareness Month. And what made me think of it was I was thinking about this story, how I had the stroke in the hospital. And we're talking about things like, the acronym Be Fast when it comes to stroke, and how, the faster people are sort of aware, the faster the stroke survivor or person having a stroke can get to the hospital. Perhaps they can get, immediate medical treatment where they're able to sort of stop the stroke or from doing all the damage that it could do. And, I think back to my stroke, and I never blame the hospital, and I really want to be very careful. I do not blame the hospital. I had made some poor life choices. I don't think anything I was doing directly led to the stroke, but it was kind of a combination of all the things I had done up to the age 37. I mean, you do have to do a bit of work and make a couple of wrong choices to really get to that point. But again, it is Stroke Awareness Month. I do want to say that because this episode will probably come out here in the middle of May of 2023. And I think it's important to talk about. And back to the story, I was really glad to hear that he is making some lifestyle changes, because I think, hopefully a few people started listening to this podcast that maybe don't want to have a stroke, because I feel like I'm very good about not sugarcoating it, for better or worse. I mean, some people like sugarcoating things. I don't see a ton of value in that. Shit's hard. You don't want to have a stroke, and you definitely want to be able to hopefully find the help you need before it gets to the point you're a stroke survivor, because nobody wants to go through that. I think every survivor listening to that knows that they would not have chosen this path if given the choice. But again, I think going back to what I was talking about earlier is that I struggled to even talk about stroke in this journey initially, because I don't want to be I don't want to seem like a victim. I don't consider myself a victim. That's never the intention when I share these things, whether I'm sharing about my running journey on Twitter or sharing about I share a ton about breathing, because I really feel like that's been another big game changer for me. And I really want to help other survivors who maybe honestly, it's still difficult to find a ton of good resources out there. I mean, I talk about this new book that I found a couple months ago now, Hope After Stroke. And it's such a good book. I might change some things up, but I don't think it's worth. I would only be writing a book at this point because to serve my ego. I don't think the world needs more books on stroke. I think this is a really good starting point and jumping off point. Again, the author is Segonia Tanzeman. I believe she's theoretically a stroke coach, which is interesting to me, being that I used to work primarily as a coach as well for the last 2 years, full time working with moms and women in particular, for the most part. And I love coaching. I feel like I'm good at it. I'm good at asking questions. I'm good at getting to the root of the problem. I hear the things that people aren't saying typically. To be fair, sometimes I think I assume that, but I have a pretty good track record of assuming correctly. That being said, I could get into the whole thing about coaching, and I think there's a lot of great things about coaching. I think, with the community, one of the things I want to offer is, I want to offer a lot of things with the community for survivor science, but I think, one-on-one coaching, because I think there are sort of generalized problems, of course, and there are certainly resources that can be shared, and peer-to-peer is great, but I want to make time available for people that have individual questions, because I think that is equally important. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I feel like we're often talking about mindset here, and it's just, there's a lot of value in it. And I guess the thing I want to talk about, just to wrap it up today, the topic of today's episode was really embracing the new you and sort of letting go of the old way of thinking for really the way you embrace life. And this ties in perfect, because if I'm being honest, I grew up in Jersey. I'm now 40 years old. I would have thought 20 years ago, life coaching was the stupidest thing. I did think it was the stupidest thing on earth. I think the world has changed, and I've evolved, and I've grown. And through, unfortunately, it took having a stroke, which is very drastic. And I don't recommend it, but it has. I've changed my life as a result of stroke. And I wish I would have listened sooner in hindsight, now having gone through it. But I'm lucky to be alive. I do believe people can change if you want to change and you put in the work. And yes, sometimes I give tough love, because I honestly, frankly, needed tough love. Even after I had my stroke, the first couple, it took a little while for me to wrap my head around things and get my shit together, if I'm being honest, and it takes some time. And I think there's that old saying, the only constant in life is change. And that's certainly true. And I think the faster you become aware of that and start to embrace that, the easier it will be to navigate the recovery and the different stages and the plateaus, and really get back to a life that you enjoy. And for me, that's one of just honesty and humor. And I feel like, there's a ton I could say. I could probably say it more next week, but I think we'll leave it there. If you stuck with me this long today, I appreciate you. I do want to let you know you can sign up for the newsletter. Again, that's, you can go to podcast.lovablesurvivor.com. Over there, right on the right-hand side, you can sign up for the newsletter. And also, if you're into it, you can leave a review right there on the website, top menu. Again, podcast.lovablesurvivor.com/reviews. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a good weekend. We'll talk next week. Bye.